In the afternoon of June 13th, 2023, activists from the distress hotline organisation Alarm Phone alerted the Greek authorities to a fishing boat in distress. The boat was called the Adriana and it was carrying about 750 people. They had left Libya 2 days before and were hoping to reach Italy. But about 10 hours after the activists had raised the alarm, the Adriana sank 45 miles or 72 kilometres off the coast of Pylos, right in front of the eyes of the Greek coastguards. Only 104 of the 750 people survived. This is The Civil Fleet, the podcast focused on the activist-led refugee rescue and support missions across Fortress Europe, with me, Ben Coles. In today's episode, we're going to speak with Spyros from the Free Pylos 9 campaign. He's going to tell us more about the Pylos Shipwreck and how it sank when the Greek coastguards tried to tow it. He's also going to tell us about the 9 survivors who were used as scapegoats for the disaster, about the campaign to free them, and how they were treated once they were acquitted. So before we get into today's podcast, I'd like to remind you that The Civil Fleet is not just a podcast, it's also a news blog with news reports, investigative stories and interviews. So you can go to civilfleet.com to find out more about that. Actually, I've not been able to update it recently because I've been quite busy in my life, but there'll be more stories on there soon. Go check out the investigations I've got on there, and some of the interviews are great too. Also, if you like what the Civil Fleet is doing and you would like to help us to continue to platform the amazing activists, journalists, refugees, people on the move, the lawyers, the campaigners, the researchers, etc., then you can support us with a small donation or a massive donation if you like. If you donate the price of a coffee, which is about £3 these days, or €3.50 or $3.90, if you make that kind of small donation, either a one-off or a monthly if you're an absolute legend, then you can also get access to our first ever bonus episode. So if you want to do that, you can go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet, and there you can make the donation. So that website is ko-fi.com/civilfleet. All right, that's enough of me. Into the episode with Spyros. All right, so Spyros, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, Spyros, thank you very much for coming on the Civil Fleet podcast.
Hi, Ben. Thank you very much for having me and having some thoughts about the Free Pylos 9 campaign.
Yeah, I've wanted to speak to you guys for a while. I think I contacted you earlier in the year to get you on the podcast, so I'm happy to finally get you on. So yes, you, Spyros, you're a member of the Free Pylos 9 campaign. We're going to talk about all of that. I think we just spoke before we started recording that you're in Greece and you're in Lesbos. So can you tell us, before we start talking about the Free Pylos campaign, can you tell us about yourself and a little bit about the campaign as well?
Nice one. Yes, you find me in Lesbos Island, which is an island on the Northeast Aegean Sea. It is mainly the main administrative center for the Greek state in the region, and this is probably also one of the reasons that it has been the main passage for people on the move crossing from Turkey to Greece, what is called the Eastern Mediterranean route. For myself, only a few things. I'm currently a member of the Free Pylos 9 campaign, but we have been working with different collectives and groups in Lesbos for a few years now around the border crisis. Not sure what it will be interesting more for me to say, but we could talk about the campaign.
Yes. So why don't we talk about the campaign? I always like to ask people to tell us about their background on the podcast, because I like people listening to realise that anyone can get involved in like direct action things. So thanks very much for telling us. And then, why don't you tell us about the Free Pylos campaign, the Free Pylos 9 campaign?
Okay, a few things about how it was initially organized. After the Pylos Shipwreck last June, on the 14th of June 2023, okay, It was a big shipwreck, so it attracted everyone's attention. People from the movements and from organizations working on the solidarity with people on the move realized that this would evolve into another case that the Greek state will try to conceal its responsibilities behind what happened and try to put blame to some of the people on board. And we say that because this is not an exception for the Greek state. It systematically tries to criminalize people on the move, and it has been used mainly as a deterrence method, as a message that should cross back to Turkey for people to be afraid to get on the boat to cross to Greece. However, in this case, we also had the deadliest shipwreck in the Greek history. More of 650 people lost their lives. So it wasn't only about a case of criminalizing people as smugglers, which is the usual case, but it was a case most trying to criminalize and put blame for so many deaths to people that they were victims at that incident. So they could take the blame out of the Hellenic Coast Guard and their actions the whole day, not just for capsizing the Adriana boat, but for also their unwillingness to take action earlier in a search and rescue operation. These cases are not the easiest ones, okay? Because the public feeling is usually against people on the move in Greece. You know, we have been feeding our heads with quite racist narratives for especially the last 15 years, which Greece became a place for people to reach Europe again. So we knew that there weren't many players that they would have liked to stand in solidarity with the people that they will take the charges. So with organizations and individuals that we have worked together in the past in similar cases, we came in touch and we said that okay, let's try to see what we can do about this case, because the importance behind it wasn't only to acquit the people that they were eventually charged in the Greek court, but it was also that we needed to keep the Pylos Shipwreck in the public discourse. We need to keep people being informed about what has happened that day. We understood that it wasn't going to be a popular thing for the Greek media, the Greek mainstream media. So it was two things at a time: support and acquit then eventually the 9 defendants, but also go after the Greek authorities and put them accountable for their actions on that day. So it all started in June. We eventually found that 9 people that from the survivors, from 104 survivors of the shipwreck, were charged for the actions and the happenings of that day. So with a group of lawyers that they took the initiative to support them, we organized in parallel with them a group of individuals and organizations that we were willing to try to work on the communications and the advocacy matters. This is more or less how it started. There was a base for some of us from a network called the Captain Support Network from before. But the case was something bigger, so we stepped on our previous structure, but we opened the campaign to any other individual or organization that were willing to join in and support the case. More or less, this is how it started. We need to mention that because there were 2 different trials, actually the one is not yet reached the trial stage, it's still on the preliminary investigation. We have 2 parallel groups focusing on different aspects of the case, but we were working in parallel and supporting each other. the one group, the Free Pylos 9 campaign, that was focusing on the trial concerning the 9 defendants. But there is also, we should mention the initiative that started mainly from some lawyers and juries finding that they met in Athens, which called Justice for Pylos, that they were actually mostly focusing on the case filed against the Hellenic Coast Guard in the Naval Court.
And that group was called Justice for Pylos. Pylos?
This is the initiative is called Justice for Pylos. Pylos is the way it's pronounced in Greek, and it's actually tried to organize, all the players and dynamics that they could support the case against the Hellenic Coast Guard.
I see. Why is it called the Pylos Shipwreck? That's something I'm not really sure. Is that the location of the shipwreck?
Okay, Pylos is the closest main city, or I'm not even sure if we can call it a city, mostly like a town, which is based in the southeast of Peloponnesus, where the shipwreck wasn't very close to it. It was 40 nautical miles away from the area, from the town. But we could call it as the main Greek city closest to it, the administrative center close to the area. The shipwreck, which is one of the tragedies of the event, happened about 50 miles in southern from Pylos, but it happened in what is called the area of Calypso Deep. Calypso Deep is one of the deepest spots in the Mediterranean Sea. And I call this as a tragedy because it is one of the main reasons that makes it very difficult for anyone to look at the Adriana boat, to be able to find the bodies of the people trapped in the Adriana shipwreck, and also on the legal part, to look for any evidence on the boat for the actions of the Hellenic Coast Guard that day.
Yes, it's really the shipwreck itself is really tragic, right? I think we'll just let's just talk about the shipwreck for a moment. So my understanding is that a ship called the Adriana left from Libya and it had about 700 people on the boat, and then on June the 14th, like you said, it was near this Pylos place, this town in southern Greece, and it sank. I remember at the time when it happened, people didn't know what caused the shipwreck, although there was people were talking about how the Greek coastguards were nearby, or the Greek coastguards I think knew about the ship for a few days as well, right? And they delayed doing anything. And then the ship wrecked, and at least 600, I think about 600 people died, around 100 people survived, right? Is that correct?
Exactly. Let's see the timeline of this story. From information that came up, and let me say that, Ben, because I think it's very important to understand also the role into solving this thing from the Greek authority side. Most of the information that we've got about what happened on that day, where did Adriana start its trip from, what has actually happened, it hasn't come out from the investigation of the Greek authorities. It was mainly European media outlets, independent media outlets, as you can imagine, that tried to figure out what had happened that day. If we had relied on what the Greek authorities had looked for, and they have published as well, we wouldn't have a clue about what happened. I say that because it is very important for the developments of the two cases. It's also very important also for the publicity of the case. That's why things like your podcast, we find it very useful for us to keep the case alive, and people who still get informed about the events of that day. Sorry for that introduction. Just thought it was important to highlight.
Yeah, I think it's true, right? The information the Greek authorities have given has been very small, and I know
True.
Lighthouse Reports is one group that's done really good reporting on the shipwreck, and I've one of their members, Bashar Deeb, has been on the podcast as well.
Yes, I've heard about, and apparently they have done a great work as well, together with also some other independent media outlets like Solomon, like Omnia TV from Greece, but also investigations from bigger media outlets from Germany, the UK, and even the US. Plus all the information coming from the countries of origins, from the people on board. We would never have the chance to get all this information if it wasn't for them. Anyways, we could get back to that later. About the timeline of the Adriana shipwreck, of the Pylos Shipwreck as it's called. Adriana, which is a fishing trawler, started its trip on the 9th of June last year from Tobruk, Libya. People on board were mainly from Pakistan, Egypt, Syria, and Palestine, as far as we know, with the majority of them being from Pakistan. Most of them, they were kept in storage houses from the Libyan networks, close to Tobruk for some time before they started their trip. So most of them, they had been already exhausted and in very bad condition even before getting on board of Adriana. Adriana is a fishing trawler. It's not directed for carrying people. So the situation that all of these people, our information is about 700 to 750 people on board, with many women and children as well. So as you can imagine, and as we can see of some of the few photos that came up in public, the situation on board was the worst you can imagine. A lot of people being on the upper deck, but mainly the majority of the people being at the two decks that were downstairs. And that is one of also of the main reasons that people were trapped. Didn't even have the chance to try to swim to survive after the shipwreck. After the third day of Adriana's trip, Adriana started from Tobruk with direction to Italy. And this is important to understand why this happened, because Greece is closer to Tobruk than Italy. But because Greece has this past, this systematic past of pushbacks, people are willing to take even more dangerous routes to try to avoid being pushed back from the Greek coastguard and the Greek authorities. So on their second or third day, the trawler already started to having some engine failures. Engines stopping to work. The food and the water started to run out. And from the information we have got, we had people that they had passed away after the third day, and they were still on board. People from the Adriana shipwreck managed to inform some activists in Italy about their situation, asking for help. So on the 13th of June, in the early hours of the 13th of June, around 10 in the morning, if I remember right, an activist from Alarm Phone, Naval Sufi, informed the Italian authorities, the Greek authorities, Frontex, and if I remember right, also UNHCR about the situation. So we know that everybody knew since 11 o'clock in the morning that there was a boat in distress with people already that have passed away on board, with people in very bad conditions. They all knew about it. We have also the official logs from the Italian Search and Rescue Operation Center that was sent to the Greek relative one, with an official informative note about what is going on and that the Greek authorities should take responsibility of search and rescue operations since it was in the Greek search and rescue zone. The Greek authorities tried to ignore all this. The first thing that they did, their first reaction to this information came up 3 hours later when they decided to send a helicopter from Lesbos Island to look for the Adriana trawler. However, that wasn't needed. They already knew the geoposition of the Adriana shipwreck. What they were willing to do was to delay any operation, hoping that Adriana would have managed to cross to the Italian search and rescue zone, and then it would have been a problem for the Italians. The helicopter from Lesbos to reach the area of the Adriana trawler, it was 3 hours away. There were many more other helicopters, vessels, and anything needed much closer to Adriana if they wanted just to spot the boat and find out about the situation. But even when they found out what is going on, even when they saw it with their own eyes, even when they got all the footage from the Frontex drone that flew over Adriana, it is for the people that have seen the photos and the videos, it's all coming from there. And we can see on the photos and the videos that people were waving their hands, asking for help. However, the Greek authorities and the Greek Joint Rescue Operation Center, what they have been repeatedly saying, trying to cover their responsibilities, is that for somehow they talk with people on board through some satellite phones or something, and ask them if they need any help, and the people denied. We need to understand that they have never told us which were the people that they were talking with, because we already know, we have the logs from the alarm phone, we have all the evidence from the footage that people were asking for help. So who were the ones that they talked to and decided, and they could decide for all people on board that they shouldn't start a search and rescue operation? But apart from that, we also need to remember, if you have a boat like this, it's not about anyone to decide if they should be rescued or not. It is an obligation to start an operation. And there's an obligation to send rescue ships and not patrol ships like the Greek authorities do.
Absolutely. Like you said earlier, this was a fishing boat, right? It's not supposed to have 700 people on it. They should have just started a rescue immediately.
No, you are not allowed to ignore a boat on a situation like this. You need to start immediately a rescue operation.
Yeah.
A rescue operation that never started. A rescue operation that they knew from 11 o'clock in the morning what was happening. They had footage, they knew with their own eyes, they had seen what was happening, and they never sent a rescue ship to the area. One of the most highly developed, with the best equipment rescue ships in the Mediterranean Sea was just sitting a couple of hours away from the Adriana ship. They never asked from this ship to get close to it. The only thing that they did, they ordered two commercial ships, two commercial cargo ships, to get to Adriana and provide them with food, petrol, and water. But the people didn't want water and food at that time. They needed to be rescued. They never asked for food and water at this time. They had to be rescued. And sending these two cargo ships, which were many times bigger than Adriana, trying to get close to a boat like Adriana, which was we had so many people on it, was making even more dangerous for it. In the international protocols, you shouldn't do anything like this. You need to send the rescue ships in help. You need to provide people with as many lives as you can. You need to be close to them for anything that happens. Greek authorities never started an operation like this. They prefer to send these cargo ships to throw food and water on Adriana, which was something that, as we know from the survivors, it was something that caused a lot of stress to the people on board in their effort to reach anything they could. There was a big danger for them to capsize just from that. The Greek authorities decided, instead of a rescue ship, to send a patrol ship, which was funded, we should say that it was funded 90% by the European funds, as being part of the Frontex vessels. A patrol ship which is known, together with many other vessels operating in the Greek seas, for taking part in pushback operations. A proof of what was their intention behind that was that on board at the patrol ship wasn't only the crew of the ship, but it was also a special operations unit of the Hellenic coastguards. Units that, as far as we know, and trying to prove through different ways, are the ones carrying out the pushback operations.
I didn't know that. That's interesting and quite bad, right?
I don't know. There are so many things that happened on that day that we are finding very hard to focus on what was the worst thing that happened that day from the Greek side.
That's terrible.
So what has actually happened, as far as we know, coming out from the testimonies of the survivors, what we had was 104 survivors from the shipwreck. From the total of 700 to 750 people, only 104 managed to survive. And finally, it was only 84 bodies that Greek authorities managed to recover. There are still so many people lying down in Adriana with all their families waiting for any news they could get, or waiting for their beloved ones to manage to give them all the appropriate procedures. So what happened, as far as we know, Adriana's engine broke down again around midnight time, in Greek time, and the Greek authorities, the Greek Joint Operations Center, decided and ordered all the other boats, apart from the Greek vessel, to leave the area. This is not something that you do if you have a boat in distress. As you can understand, when you have a case like this, what you need to have is many boats, smaller and larger, close to it, being able to go in support and help in case something bad happens. But no, what they did, they ordered all the other vessels to sail away, to go away. And it was only the vessel, the Greek Hellenic Coast Guard vessel with the number 920 that stayed there. When the engine of Adriana failed, I know that they tried to tow the boat. They threw a rope on the boat, ordering the people on board to tie it on Adriana. As we know, they tried to tow Adriana, the rope was cut. Then they had a second try, because these patrol vessels are not suitable for towing a boat like that. And to tell you the truth, as far as we know, talking with all these rescue organizations, sea rescue organizations, you never try to tow a boat like that. What you need to do is offer surviving equipment and try slowly to remove people from the boat in distress. On their second try to tow Adriana, it was what made it to capsize. There are some very tragic stories, you can find them online, from some of the survivors describing these last moments. Adriana capsized. People that were on the upper deck fell in the sea, but tragically, the people that they were in lower decks, which were also all the women and children that were on board, were trapped in the shipwreck. What is one of the other things that makes people furious about the actions of the Greek authorities is that we know that even when the Adriana capsized, even when people fell in the sea, the Greek vessel that was there didn't start a rescue operation for at least 30 minutes. There are people that they say that this took even longer, but let's say that it was for 30 minutes. They were looking at people being drowned, and they never started an operation. The only time they started the rescue operation was 30 minutes later, when other boats that were eventually called from the Joint Rescue Operations Center from Piraeus, Athens, they were called to reach the area.
That's terrible, isn't it? So there could have been more survivors. That's awful.
It's not only political that we understand that it's the main motive behind their actions. It is also very inhuman. It's something that you cannot understand how this crew of this vessel could sit there and look at people drowning and not doing anything. And this is also something that we cannot understand for all these men and women that they are in the Greek forces, carrying out all these pushback operations, that they have ended up to many deaths. People that died in the Adriana shipwreck are not the first victims of this policy, of these deterrence policies of the Greek state. We have dozens of people that have died before, and there are some culprits behind it. There are people that it is because of their actions that these people have died. And apart from the political aspect of all these cases, there is also a human thing behind it. We cannot understand how all these dozens of men and women working in the Hellenic Coast Guard doing the pushback operation, we haven't found even one not willing to take actions like that.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's terrible.
I think that could be another postcard on its own. Let's don't focus on that, sorry.
That's okay. So, I think that was a really good summation of what happened now. It was really thorough. Thanks very much, Spyros. So, afterwards, according to this investigation that Lighthouse Reports did and other groups did, that they found that the survivors were taken to somewhere, they were detained, and their statements were tampered with. They didn't have very good translators for them. And then 9 people were accused of causing the shipwreck, right?
Exactly.
Can you tell us, tell us about the 9 people? What were they charged with? Tell us about what happened to them.
Yes. After some of the survivors were brought back to Kalamata, which is the biggest city of the area, and has the hospital, the main hospital of the area and everything, the survivors actually weren't supported immediately. They were all taken under custody into some storage houses based in the port of Kalamata. Maybe you have seen the photos of people lying on the floor with just a blanket given to them, with people with guns that's walking around above their heads. People that they have just managed to survive a shipwreck like that. The ones that they were in the worst conditions, they were driven to the hospital of Kalamata. Obviously, because it became a big issue, a public issue, the Greek authorities showed some will that they wanted to find what happened, find the people responsible for the shipwreck from the start. And they had to direct the eyes to some scapegoats. So, they started taking some testimonies which we later found out that the interpreters that were present were not official ones. Imagine that one of the testimonies was the interpreter was doing it was a Coast Guard officer himself. That we need to understand that in cases like this, one of the organizations that may have been involved in a crime cannot be the one investigating the case. But that was what happened that day. So they took from the 104 survivors, they took only 9 testimonies. Each one, from each testimony, they were pointed to one different person. So we have 9 testimonies and 9 people charged for what happened. But even in the testimonies, there are many things that we can say. One of all that you mentioned also is that we could see that what was written in the testimonies could have been what has been exactly testified by people asked. Because we had even 2-3 sentences in a row that were exactly the same. They were copy-paste in different testimonies. We can understand that this cannot be happening. And also we know that that people were willing to testify in these first nine testimonies about the actions of the Greek vessel, but they never allowed them to do so. People were scared. All of them were in a shock after what has just happened. And actually, what they had said about the people that the Hellenic Coast Guard accused later, the Greek authorities accused later, no one said that any of them was part of the smuggling network. The only thing that they said that guy was the one that passed me the water. That guy was the one that passed me an apple.
That's unreal. That's unreal. Yeah. Normally they accuse people who steer the boat or something, right? This is what's happening a lot in Greece: is people steer the boat or put someone on the boat and they get accused of being a smuggler. But that's like people giving water and apples and things. How can they be charged with anything?
Greeks have a big history in theatrical plays. I think we have kept this tradition and we are building on this, on the backs of other people, unfortunately. Anyways, these 9 people found themselves accused with 4 different charges. What I have also to mention is that some of them were still hospitalized when the Hellenic Coast Guard officers went and arrested them on these accusations and took them from inside the hospital. And because they needed also the publicity against them, so to try to cover up for their actions, what they did also was that they shared their pictures, the picture of these 9 men, they shared them with some of the Greek mainstream media, especially towards one that we can call it a tabloid in English terms. And that paper came out front page with the 9 pictures of these 9 men. These 9 men that they had just survived one of the worst things in their life. And these pictures never came out from the case file. These pictures were never in the case file, so we can understand that they were sent directly from the phones of the Coast Guard officers that were sent to arrest them. Anyways, these 9 were charged with 4 different charges. The 2 were for illegal entry in Greek territory, and the other one was for transporting people into the Greek territory without official papers and everything. The other 2 was for causing the shipwreck that could cause death, and for also the other one was as members of a criminal organization. I distinguish this in two groups of charges because it has a meaning later for the trial and the decision of the trial. The 9 of them were taken to some Greek prisons. 8 of them were taken to the prisons of Nafplio. And the one who was the youngest one, he was at the time 19 years old, he was taken to the prisons of Ablona, who are for people underage or just over 18. Despite all the efforts and all the evidence that were filed by the defense team of the 9 all this year long, that we were waiting until the trial, that were proving that they weren't responsible for what happened. They were just people on board, trying to seek for asylum. The Greek authorities denied all this evidence and kept these 9 men in prison until the trial, but in a very specific thing, that revengeful thing that they did later, they kept some of them even a month after they were acquitted from all charges.
Yes, I remember you campaigning about that, about the people still being in jail after they were found, after the charges were dropped against them.
No, that was crazy, and it was so apparently revengeful towards them.
So how the trial? Can you tell us how long did the trials last? And
yeah, let's go to the trial. The trial was decided I should take part in Kalamata, in the criminal court of Kalamata, because that was the administrative area where when everything happened. It took place on the 21st of May, if I remember right. Sorry for that if the date is wrong. It was around then.
That's okay. Yeah, we can check later. That's fine.
So we managed to move there, and also people from different organizations, group or political parties. Very few political parties, we have to say. Okay. That they managed to mobilize some people, so we had some presence there. Again, I have to say this for the Greek media, because it plays a big role for the Greek narrative. The main attention that this case has attracted has come mainly through international media, and not the Greek ones. There were very few Greek independent media that wanted to cover the case, to cover the trial, and help the public awareness. But it was mainly the international media that showed the proper attention to what was happening. And we could see that also to the press conference that the support team gave 1 week before the trial, but also in the courtrooms. What happened in the trial was something that, for many of us, we could say that it went better than what we expected. Because the judges of the criminal court of Kalamata actually recognized all the evidence that the defense team has already filed all the previous year to the authorities. They recognized that the 9 of them were just passengers on board, and that what happened in international waters. So, in legal terms, what happened was that the case was dismissed on the charges for the criminal organization part and the causing the shipwreck, because the Greek courts were incompetent to try a case like that has happened in international waters. And also acquitted the 9 defendants from the charges of illegal entry and transporting people without papers, without official papers in the Greek territory, just on the simple ground that these people, they never entered the Greek territory. All the time they were in international waters. The point that they entered the Greek territory, for somebody to accuse them for something like this, was after their rescue, after they were picked up by the Greek authorities. And I mention this, I try to highlight this, because these two things are so obvious. They're all so apparent from the start, that this happened on international waters, and that the Greek courts were incompetent to try a case like that. So these 9 men, they should have never been taken in custody from the start. It was so easily explained. All the defense team have done a great job behind this to prove this. So it wasn't only that their detention was unjust. It was also that it was very revengeful. These nine people were instrumentalized by the Greek authorities once more in the systematic policies they have, to try to cover up for their actions and to find some scapegoats for what's happening, for all the deaths all these years in the Greek seas. Happily, in a very quick trial, it only took, if I remember right, 2-3 hours we stayed there. The decision was given. We need people to understand that the court didn't go in depth on what happened that day, which is something that we would like to happen. But this is something that we'll go after in the Naval Court of Pires that examines the criminal obligations, the criminal participation of the Hellenic Coast Guard on the shipwreck. So it was only examined the case mostly on legal and administrative grounds. The 9 were acquitted. You can understand how happy everyone was in the room, and outside the courtroom where all these people were waiting all this long, people that were attacked by the police in the morning as they were trying to put their banners outside the court. But all this happiness, all this joyful feeling that we had about, at least the first part of the case was won, was quickly taken back by the Greek authorities, which the next day that they were supposed to release people from the prisons they were taken back, they published a note from the Greek police saying that the 9 will be held under administrative detention this time, because their asylum application, the international protection application, had to be examined first. This is not something that happens normally. Okay, if your asylum application is accepted, your presence in the country is legal. You have legal rights. You're not posing any threat to anyone to be held under administrative detention. So everyone felt that was a revengeful move by the Greek authorities due to the decision of the Greek court. Eventually, and after again all the efforts given by the defense team and the solidarity groups, eventually the 9 of them are released, and we are also working on them, try to see our next legal steps against their unjust detention, but also against the actions of the Hellenic Coast Guard and the causing of the shipwreck.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for all that. That was really good. You told us a lot of information now. That was really well told. Thanks, Spyros. And yeah, it's good to know that they're no longer in prison. But someone has to. Like, people need to be brought to justice here, right? The shipwreck didn't just happen out of the blue. It happened because the Greek Coast Guards were towing it. We talked about before we started recording, I was confused. So the Coast Guards, there's Coast Guards, they're not on trial, right? There's kind of an administrative process going on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. On this, we have two different aspects, two different things running at the moment. And I need to highlight that for us, the acquittance of the 9, the Free Pylos 9 campaign, it's called, focusing on the story of the 9 previous defendants. But our main goal is to help people accountable for what they did on that day. And we know that it was the Greek authorities that should be held accountable. So there is a lot of effort being put on these next steps. This has been dealt in 2 different ways at the moment. Because of the refusal of the Greek authorities and the Hellenic Coast Guard to start an internal investigation, the Greek Ombudsman Office started an investigation itself. And that came only because of the pressure that came up from the international attention on the case. So at the moment, this is the only open case running against the Hellenic Coast Guard. When we found out, again through some media information and not directly from the authorities, that eventually 10 of the Hellenic Coast Guard officers that were on board of the 920 vessel that day were called to testify as suspects for what happened. However, any decision taken by the Ombudsman Office, it's not about the criminal part of the case. It's only on administrative grounds. It can examine all the failures of the Hellenic Coast Guard not to follow the procedures, the normal procedures on that day. So even if they eventually been filed with charges, the penalties could be only on administrative grounds. They can be kicked out of the Hellenic Coast Guard body, or they can be on a leave for a few months. They can be fined, maybe some of them, for what happened on that day. But this can never cover what has happened and the deaths, the 600 deaths that took place on that day. This is another case that's running, and it's started because some of the survivors, at the moment, I think it is about 53 or 56 of them that they have signed a complaint towards the Naval Court of Piraeus for the actions of the Hellenic Coast Guard. This is a criminal court. This can examine the responsibilities of the Hellenic Coast Guard. But even that we are now, 13 months after the shipwreck, the case is still on the preliminary investigation stage. The prosecutor, the interrogator behind the case that examines the case, still haven't come up to a decision if they're gonna send the case to a courtroom, if they are gonna dismiss it. And one of the things that the decision for the case of the 9 was very important for us was that we all felt before that what the Greek authorities were willing to do is put the blame on these 9 men for the shipwreck. So the naval court then could go on suggesting that since the people guilty of the shipwreck were found, there was no need for any further investigation and any further legal actions. Fortunately, the decision of the Kalamata leave us the grounds to go deeper in the investigation. It has taken too long, but from our side, we should say again that for us, the most important thing is that we don't want a fast-track procedure. We want a thorough investigation and to go deep on what has happened on this day. So the real culprits of the Adriana shipwreck will be brought to justice. There is a group of lawyers from some organizations and a collective of lawyers and juries in Athens that they are behind this case. That they were the ones, together with the survivors, that they filed the complaint in the Naval Court. And there are more people and more lawyers will join in this case in the near future.
That's good. It's good to know that people are working on finding some justice and holding people accountable. Spyros, I think I'm going to move on to the last couple of questions, which are a bit more broader. So was there anything else you wanted to say about the Pylos 9 or the campaign or the trial or anything?
Just in few words, I should say that the Pylos 9 case is not yet officially closed. There is still time. We are within the time frame that the Greek authorities, the highest court of the Greek state, is allowed to make an appeal on the decision, which is not impossible to happen. So we are still waiting for that. When we have the final news, we will publish it through our social media accounts and through the website we have done, so people can find out about the closure or not of this case. What I need to say in a more broadly maybe aspect is that, as I said earlier, the Pylos victims are not the only ones. Pushbacks on operations, it is a systematic policy of the Greek and European authorities. There are dozens, hundreds of people that they are still dying in the Mediterranean Sea as a result of these operations. What was important for us in this case, of the Pylos case, it wasn't only to find justice for these victims. It was also that because that was a case that attracted international attention, was to step on this and manage to make people aware, make the international public aware of what is happening on the European borders. When we can see there are death politics to take place, through the deterrence of people on the move, from the people held in the detention centers, and go on. So it's not the only case that we want people to give their support and have their attention on it. It is just an emblematic one for us.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, we on the Civil Fleet podcast, we've had a few different people that have been, charged with human smuggling in Greece. Exactly. And a few in other places, but this is happening a lot. The Pylos or Pylos 9 case is not an aberration. It's not something new. This is happening all the time, right? Which is crazy. And I'm so glad there's people like you and the other people that I've had on this podcast exposing this and working against it. So how are you feeling about the future for people on the move in Europe? It feels like dark times to me. What do you think?
Unfortunately, I'm not one of the optimistic ones, Ben, to tell you the truth. We've seen the directions also of the new pact on migration and asylum. We know that the direction of the Greek and European authorities, because we need to understand that behind the actions of the Greek authorities, there are the directions of the European ones, and the full support and also funding of these operations. But as we can see that their response towards migration, towards people on the move, is the increasing militarization and securitization of the borders and the European territory in general, I'm not sure if we can be very optimistic. If we would like to be optimistic, I would like to only focus on the solidarity movements. A solidarity movement that they have seen themselves being criminalized. We've seen many people, many friends, comrades, and colleagues being criminalized at the past for just trying to provide some support people reaching in Europe. And despite all these charges against them, behind all this terror against them, movements are still standing strong as they can. That is, from my side, the only optimistic thing I can see on that.
Yeah, I agree. There's pretty much zero faith that states will do anything good. I feel like most governments are only going to make the situation worse. But what makes me feel good and optimistic is the solidarity movement. Normal people are doing stuff to fight against what our governments are doing. That's where I find optimism. But it's I still feel pretty depressed about the whole situation.
Yeah, nothing to be very happy about it.
Well, Spyros, that was really good. It's been great to speak with you. We'll have to keep in touch, and I'll keep following what's happening with the Pylos 9 and other developments in Greece. Hopefully, like we said before we started recording, I can get to Greece next year and we can meet in person. That would be great.
Ben, I really thank you for all the time. I know that it may have taken longer than what we expected. I wasn't sure in which point exactly we should more focus on, but thank you very much for this podcast. And really, I'm very glad that people around Europe, people that are not directly affected, like I say, in the border areas from these policies, are giving any support they can. And podcasts like Civil Fleet are important for us to help keep public awareness on what's going on. So I have to thank you from my side. I'm sure all the group is very happy. All the Free Pylos 9 group are very happy for having this podcast with you, Ben. And all the best.
Thanks very much. I'll be in touch.
We will be in touch, Ben. Take care.
Okay, that was episode 60 of the Civil Fleet podcast. I cannot believe I've done 60 episodes of these. I could probably say that every episode. But yeah, wow, 60 episodes. That's amazing. I don't think I've ever done 60 of anything. So yeah, what do we have to talk about at the end of the podcast? Yes. Thanks again to Spyros and the Free Pylos 9 for coming on the podcast. It's been really great to speak to them. Like I said in the episode, I've wanted to get them on for a long time, so it's really good to get them on the podcast. Go check out the show notes and you'll see lots of stuff in there on how to support them and links to the things we've talked about in the episode. Go check out the civilfleet.com, our news blog. I haven't updated it for about a month, but there'll be more stories on there once my life gets into a bit more order again. And yes, if you want to support the Civil Fleet, there's two ways to do that. The first way, which I always forget to mention, is you can share this around. And the second way you can help us is by going to co-fi.com/civilfleet, and you can make a small, really small, like £3, €3.50, $3.90 donation, and you can get access to our first bonus episode on there. You'll also help us to keep producing this podcast, keep paying for the costs of it. It's not much, to be fair, but anyway, if you'd like to help us, go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet. Our costs are super small, but any help will be greatly appreciated. Okay, I think there'll be another episode out next month. I'm trying to organise an interview with someone I've wanted to speak to for a while, so that will also be really great. So stay tuned, check out all the other episodes, and see you next time.